Your genes hold the answers to your family's overall health. I'm Dr. Paula Krupstad, and on the Get to the Root with Hope for Healing podcast, I sit down with experts in genetics, functional medicine, and family care to explore what's really going on beneath the surface so you can stop guessing and start healing. From personalized insights to practical tools, we bring you whole family wellness that starts at the root. Welcome to the Get to the Root podcast. My name's Dr. Paula Krupstad, and joining me today is Jerry Alcoser. Jerry, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dr. K.
Yes, so Jerry's daughter, Gianna, came to our practice back in March of 2025, and she has PANS, she has autism, she's 7 years old, and I think your story, Gianna's story, will be such an inspiration to other people, and everyone's looking for a magical fix. There's no such thing, and it is a journey. So I'd really love to unpack that today. And oh, by the way, we're recording this on World Autism Awareness Day.
I know.
So it's cool.
We couldn't have planned
It's
it any
cool.
better.
Yeah. So Jerry, just give our audience just a little bit of information about you.
Sure, yes. So I'm a mother of three. Gianna is my middle child. I'm also an engineer by background, so I love data. That's why this journey's been so great in working with you on that. So yeah, so mother of three, married, very close-knit family. And when we had Gianna, it was actually during COVID, and we started to see some differences compared to my older daughter, Eva. And we started to say, well, is it just because it's COVID? And it was really around the speech delay is where we saw it. We also saw some challenges post vaccinations that I did not have with my other two children. So Gianna, through her life, has had a couple vaccine injuries. And so as you and I have shared, and I've talked before, and even with other families, I wish I would have had genetic testing and knowing what I was doing, because I would have taken a different path very early on in her life. So that the genetic testing was just phenomenal information on how we can continue to support Gianna. But we started noticing that, and so we started doing speech therapy. I started working on the Nemetschek protocol to help balance her gut bacteria. So I was a mother in search of answers and was reading and really getting connected to everything I could. And it wasn't until we moved back to Houston that we got connected with you, where we've really been able to put names to what we've been seeing and actually get data and information to help us on this road to recovery for Gianna.
I appreciate that synopsis, and specifically the genetics that you're referring to. And I'll just give a shout out to our sponsor, the Grand Genomics. It's our proprietary wellness blueprint. Typically, when children are diagnosed with autism, depending on where you are and who makes the diagnosis, they do potentially Fragile X testing, a chromosomal microarray, or a whole exome. But this is different because this is systems throughout the body. What you alluded to, and we've talked about this too, is I'm not anti-vax. I'm not, it's that, and neither are you. It's we're pro-immunization and pro-patient. So the unique individualities, that's what the blueprint gave you. All right. So let's go back to March of 2025. You'd found out about the practice, Hope for Healing here in Houston, and we do genetics anywhere and everywhere, by the way. So I'm so glad. It was so fortuitous that you found us, and it's
Yes.
so exciting to see the progress she's made, because it's been so encouraging to me too as a provider. So we did her initial set of labs, and we received some alarming results, some raised antibody levels. And do you remember that? And can you kind of unpack the conversation that we had? Because I know it was a sentinel moment.
It was. It was one of those
Yes.
things. So, because we had tested Gianna for strep, and all the swabs were negative. And so we got the blood work back and saw strep, and we're like, okay, so we did a brief round of antibiotics, and I'll never forget, I got the call and it says Gianna needs surgery. And I was like, what's going on? We went from here to here. I need to understand more. And so I
Yes.
appreciate, you spent well over an hour with my husband and I both walking through everything and why we ended up leading to getting her tonsils taken out. And that was truly a pivotal moment in her health journey. I know I shared with you day 3 after we got her tonsils out, she was shaking her head yes and no, and she has never done that in her entire life.
And for a 6-year-old child, it's developmentally appropriate for a 1-year-old to shake their head yes and no and
Mhm.
maybe not know what it means. But for you to see at 6 years of age, that type of communication,
Yes,
appropriate, huge, huge.
huge, and she was still also wearing a diaper at night. Now she was potty trained, but still wearing a diaper at night. Within, like, 2 or 3 days, she actually pushed the diaper away at night, and we haven't had an accident since. She's not wearing a diaper at night post that. And, we were kind of going through like, okay, is this just coincidence? As you're trying to kind of understand this journey. And we have seen continued benefit from that pivotal moment, from getting the tonsils out and then working with her diet and supplements and going, gluten free, dairy free, and continuing it to where now we're hearing words. You would love just this weekend. She found a cowboy hat and she put it on and said cowboy verbally and
Yay.
said, "Yeehaw!" And I was like, "Oh, great." And it's rodeo season in Houston. So it was just but we all looked at each other, and so she's really making these great connections, and we're
Yes.
starting to hear a lot more verbal words.
Actually, that's so exciting. The other thing that you told me was that Gianna had never slept through the night. And within
Correct.
2 weeks of having the tonsillectomy and the adenoidectomy, and it's not like she was snoring or had
Mm-mm.
obvious obstructive sleep apnea, but then and I did only spend 45 minutes, not well over an hour. It may have seemed
It
like
felt
that.
like that.
Yes. And too, I feel incumbent upon me as a medical practitioner, and the strep testing that we're referring to is anti-streptolysin O and DNase B. And part of our workup when a kiddo comes in, we swab their throat, we swab their nose, and we may swab their bottom. We don't stick the culturette in, but just around the anus because
Mhm.
there are reservoirs of bacteria and what we call group A beta hemolytic strep. So she was officially diagnosed with PANDAS,
Mhm.
pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcal infections, but no one child shows up the same way. One of the things that I remember too, we typically do pre-medicate with antibiotics when our kids and even adults that have brain inflammation go in for a tonsillectomy, adenoidectomy, because they can seed their bloodstream with bacteria and you'll get a flare after the
Mm.
surgery. So I remember that she didn't have strep growing out of her tonsils, but she had some really disgusting, what we call gram-negative endotoxin producing organisms. And one in particular, a large amount, was called Fusobacterium nucleatum. Now, a little bit of that is okay, like 6% or so, but she had a large percentage, and that is being associated with Alzheimer's disease and colon cancer. And we see it in children who are not neurotypical and in adults who have neurodegeneration here at our practice. So
Mm.
I I remember, like you said, you're analytical, you need data, and I think that that was very reassuring afterwards to see what was growing in her tonsils.
Mhm.
So, and then for you to see, and you're doubting yourself, and I think too, the questions that go through parents' minds, and if you care to reflect on that, it's like, why would we want to remove tonsillar tissue or adenoidal tissue that is meant to be a barrier to infection? So if you can think back to
Huh.
some of the stuff that you went through in your mind.
Yes, and so, and it really spawned out of the conversation you and I were having around the details in the data. And so what really was, to me is that the junk that was in her tonsils can cross the blood-brain barrier and attack the basal ganglia and lead to
Yes.
longer term. And I was like, okay, so we really quickly did a what I'll call a high level risk assessment and says,
Yes.
okay, you don't need these for longevity. This isn't a part, what is the worst that can happen here is that we see improvement. And so my husband and I went through that conversation pretty quickly, but it was really that data saying you've seen this in multiple patients
Yes.
and seen success and also seen what can hide in there that can cross that blood-brain barrier, and so we took action very quickly post that conversation to get her scheduled because you also as a parent struggle with, like, do I wanna have surgery for my child? What is recovery gonna look like? And God bless her, the recovery was not easy, but the benefits completely outweighed that week or so where she really struggled with recovery, because it's painful. But she
Yes.
did really well, and like I said, we just continue to see compounding benefits,
Yes.
uh, and how connection is with her brother and sister, how she's engaging at school. Because even prior to this, we had seen a different child because she was in a flare, and the school was saying, "What have you done with Gianna? She's not the sweet little Gianna we know." And I was like, she was having rage fits. She was having, and that all subsided post the tonsil surgery, and it's like, we got our girl back. And that's what even the teachers were saying. So it wasn't just, my husband and I seeing it. The teachers were seeing this as well at her school. And we continued,
Yes.
like I said, continued to see benefits with her through her speech therapy, working with the teachers, her engagement, the connection she's putting together. She's starting to write her name. We did not see any of that before. And, very interested, following directions, like 2 and 3 step directions, which is
Yes.
not something, I mean, and we'd have to tell her even simple directions multiple times. She's now starting to be like, "Okay, Gianna, pick that up and go put that in the washing machine." Boom, boom, boom. Like, and you tell it once. And so we're really starting to see all that come together.
That's beautiful. What you just said, it wasn't easy. It was a 2-week recovery. It's hard, but like you said, the benefits outweigh it. And
Huh.
let's go back to what was in the tonsils. It's what the organisms within the tonsils produce. They're called endotoxins. Oops, why is my phone going off? That's not right. Sorry about that. Endotoxins are made by what we call gram-negative, I call them poopy water bacteria. And we've also discovered that Gianna has a medical condition called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which some people will say mold illness, but I say biotoxin illness. And, within the interior of a water damaged building, it's not just mold. In fact, we've learned so much in the last few years is that actually 47% of biotoxin influence is actually a gram-positive bacteria called Actinomycetes, actinos to be short, and it lives on people and in people. It lives in the mouth. People who have periodontal disease, halitosis, people who have dandruff and maybe eczematous skin, it can live there. But those gram-negative poopy water bacteria, sometimes when people have pets like cats, if they let their kitty litter get too massive, it can also spread endotoxins, but mold is actually a very small part of the cause of all of this. So your description of everything that she's gained, and then you have the objective third-party observers saying
Mhm.
what's going on, she's improving. How inspirational to give people hope.
It is. And what's been great is being able to share this with other families. It's been interesting to see just how many families are struggling and across kind of the autism spectrum and things they're seeing, whether it be from ADHD to what we diagnose as kind of on the autism spectrum. So I've even engaged with 3 or 4 families here recently and gone back to, like, you need the genetic blueprint if you can, and then you can see, and then I go into diet. What are your children eating?
Yes,
Where are you getting your food source? I get into all these things that really can continue to help their child on the journey. And I have a couple of families that are just now doing the genetic testing, which are
yay,
wonderful. And I said, get the data, get to the root cause. I mean, I believe as a society, we treat a lot of symptoms, but it's
yes.
really understanding, why am I seeing that symptom? And how do I truly that's why I love, get to the root is just really, love the website name and your practice name for that, and Under Hope for Healing, because it's really what we're trying to do here, trying to understand, why is she having these symptoms? What is the trigger that's causing that?
Yes, thank you for that. Jerry, tell me what you have done. And I'm also holding here, and I can share these. I'll just go ahead and share right now. And then I want you to kind of unpack, and then we can put this into the show notes. You
Okay, perfect.
if you want to too, I don't know if you have the ability to type into the chat if there is one or not. Maybe there isn't, but I'll let you spell it out. So Gianna is your daughter, and you have created some books and some coloring books that are
Yes.
so sweet. So one of them is called No Words, Just Love. Gianna goes to school. And there's
Yes.
two versions of it. Then the next one is called No Words, Just Love. Then the third one is No Words, Just Love. Gianna becomes a big sister. So tell us about your foundation and where people
Yes.
can find you because you truly are, and I think this just goes into your wiring. You are a woman on a mission. And it's true, Gianna's story is so inspirational and it's a process. You're still going through this, and that's the thing. And you had done some things previously, like you said, the check protocol
Hmm.
prior to moving to Houston, and
Yeah.
all these things work together. So tell us about your foundation and where people can find you.
Perfect. Yeah. So we're working on a couple things, but I'll start kind of with how this spawned. I said there's nothing more frustrating than not knowing how to help your child. And so when we got kind of in very early diagnosis, I remember just being so frustrated and there was not a sense of community. I didn't know how to reach out to. You're doing a lot of research on your own. And you feel helpless. And it's like, how can I help my child? And what does that future look like for them? So, and then when we found you, it was so great because we saw data and we saw a path to healing. And I got to reflect there are so many families that don't have, whether it be the physical means, the financial means, to be able to get the resources and help they did. So I said, we have to make a difference. We have to help those that are really struggling. So I started writing kind of No Words, Just Love. And so that's the first book. And it really talks about the beautiful relationship between Gianna Nonverbal and her sister Eva. And a portion of all the proceeds of those books go to help other families. So we've been able to help families do multiple different things. And we're now on another journey, which is not out yet, to really create a website and a community where families can come together. Resources will be a lot more available. You can connect with families that are dealing with multiple type of special needs and or disabilities and how we can truly help more people. And I'll have to tell you a kind of interesting story. So I mentioned I had 3 children. So the book came and we were so excited. And my little son, Gianluca, was like, where am I? And so it already setting up, writing that she gets a little brother. And that book was really important to me because we were hesitant to have another child because we didn't want to take away the care from that Gianna needed. I was
Yes.
also concerned, like, what if there's also the same type of challenges with the third child and can we support them effectively? And then I also didn't know how Gianna was going to respond.
I'd like to thank Fagron Genomics for sponsoring our podcast. Without knowing what your precision genetics are, you don't have a roadmap. So please log on to our website, schedule a welcome call, and see what the Wellness Blueprint can do for you. That's the premier and proprietary genetic panel that Fagron has allowed us to create. Yes.
I didn't know how I mean, very much, the routine is important. And
Yes.
so I'm like, what are we doing here? And I'll never forget, we brought him home and she went over and touched his nose and then she touched her nose. And it was like the most beautiful see, and she like really accepted him. And she has never once been aggressive towards him, just loving towards him, very protective. I remember he would lose his little binky and she'd run and go get it to him. So just that connection, I wanted people to know, like, it's okay. That acceptance will
Yes.
be there. And then the school has been a big one. So that's the last book that we just did, and we just got it to the school because we truly have, I call 'em Team Gianna, and which
Yes.
you are a critical part of, as well as
Thank
all
you.
of the teachers, but we communicate quite frequently. And so wanted to make it available because I know other families struggle with the school
Yes.
system and the
Yes.
support. And we've been truly blessed with Tomball ISD and how connected they are with us. I talk to the teachers almost daily. We're talking about, setting up the diet, which you've been able to help us with the school on what
Right.
Gianna can and can't have. And they've really been partnership. So I wanted to also explore that and share with the families and the whole purpose and why. And like you said, I am on a mission.
Yes.
our children need our help. They're the future, and it starts with all the elements that we've talked about today. And so we're hoping we can continue to help families and also provide funding and resources for those that are really struggling to help diagnose and help their children
Yes.
thrive.
It's truly extraordinary. And what you described when you brought your little guy home from the hospital, to see that within Gianna is everything she needs and her
Mhm,
beautiful, loving, sweet little spirit. And that's what so many of these kids we need to unlock. I think what you're doing, because I think 80% of improvement is in the kitchen and in the home and creating that non-toxic environment, and you're creating a platform for that. And then this is the first I'm hearing, I know I've written some letters, but to hear what Tomball ISD is doing is so encouraging, because trying to describe to people that this is not an allergy, this
mhm,
is, we're being proactive. We've identified that this child could develop celiac, or if they continue to eat gluten or what we call gluten cross-reactive foods, or maybe there's no genetic component, or that with dairy products, what we do know about dairy and gluten-containing grains, how this is very simplified, block cerebral folate receptors. And there's a lot of stuff in the news right now about leucovorin, and you can get there with methylation, leucovorin, those kind of things. But to have the school district be listening and seeing that, it's opening the door for other people. It's like, I think we had to do a compromise on corn or something like that.
yes,
It's got to be organic,
mhm,
non-GMO, or just the best they can do, or almond or cassava flour tortillas, those kind of things.
mhm,
I'm kind of remembering back. So,
yes,
you know, Jerry, if you were talking to parents that were on the fence about doing the blueprint, because I'm always like, listen, if you give your child, if you do anything at all, start with the blueprint, because that truly is a window into the soul of your child. And what you
mhm,
alluded to is that you indeed did see some changes with vaccinations.
I did.
Yeah. So we identify things genetically where the immune system, T cells specifically, have an abnormal way, or they don't properly identify foreign invaders. And then it's like it sets off a bomb in the immune system, and you
Mhm.
see regression, or you see a halting of development. What did you see with vaccines? Did you see regression,
Yeah.
or did you just see stop?
I saw regression and, it was really and the image that's burned in my head. So Gianna had her like year and a half vaccines and we saw continued regression so much so that her second birthday, I remember taking her birthday cake to her and there was zero emotion. There was no smile, no excitement. And I just remember taking like she's a shell of a child. And I remember thinking, how am I ever going to connect with my child? And that's when I started really diving into, like, the Nemetschek protocol. We got into diet, how am I balancing her gut bacteria like, we got into all of that. And then when we moved here, she was 3 and a half-ish, she had another vaccine, and I had no issues with my first child. So I'm thinking like, "Okay," and looking back, I was uneducated, and going in, and we
What
had a
we
vaccine
don't,
in the morning.
yeah, we
Yeah.
don't know what we don't know.
We don't exactly, and I dropped her off at school and they called me, and she was screaming and crying in a wheelchair and couldn't walk.
No.
So, she lost the ability to kinda walk and put any weight on her legs, so I remember going up to the school just gut wrenched, and I had to carry her home. I mean, we were so blessed because the next day she was okay and could walk and everything, but I was
Yeah.
just thinking, "What have I done?" And it was at that moment I looked at my husband, I said, "I'm done. She's not getting anything else until we find out what is really going on." That's what really started leading me to more research, like, how do we truly get to the root of this problem of what is troubling? We were looking at going to Chicago, and then I was like, "We're in Houston," and that's how we stumbled upon you. I said, "There has to be some help here," and it was there. I was done and continued to write letters, which Texas has been very, it's a lot easier to get vaccine exemptions than in some other areas, so we're able to do that. But those are things like we physically saw in her, and I said, I can't do anything else until I better understand her, and then that's where I mentioned, like, I think every infant should have genetic testing because then you can
Yes.
at least know how you should then go forward for your child on what they can and can't do. Because, like, with Eva, we saw no issues with
Yeah.
any now she was on a paced vaccine schedule because we were working with another great doctor out in California and very much on a paced schedule, but we didn't see any adverse reactions. And
Right.
so as a mother, I was like, "Oh, okay." And like I said, I'm not anti-vax, but for Gianna, it was very clearly that her body was having a negative reaction.
Correct, correct. And you are stating what so many parents reflect back. So, that, and then they get looked at sideways when they go back to the doctor. The doctor doesn't even write it down in the chart. And, you're gaslit medically. But I have to say that I used to be a vaccine Nazi. I went to Liberia, West Africa when I was in medical school, and I saw a grown woman die of tetanus. And I saw babies die of vaccine preventable illnesses. But then you pull back and you go, we're not in a third world country. We're not giving things the way that vaccines, the way we were administered vaccines a lot less frequently. And
Mhm.
so, plus the toxins in our environment are so much more too. You guys were out in California and talked about toxicity. There's more problems out there. They are waking up to that, and they have been
Mhm.
for quite a while now, which is really great.
Yeah, but one thing I wanna add, and this is where we made the change, we need to get different care for Gianna. When she couldn't walk, I called her pediatrician, and I was told that's just normal. And I said, "There is no way, shape, or form where a child can't walk for a day, which is normal." And so that was where
Mm.
I was like, "We need true answers and really a medical provider that's willing to talk through us with the data and really understand what is going on, because that's not normal." And we
No,
sometimes just kind of brush that off, and I was like, so we decided we needed to do something different to continue to help support her healing journey.
that makes me so angry when I hear that a pediatrician told you it's normal for a child not to be able to walk
Mhm.
after a vaccine. That's not normal, and it's okay to get angry about things, and I'm so grateful that you and is it Luis?
It's Luis, yeah, he's my
Luis.
husband.
I was thinking it's not Louis, it's Luis. You're both engineers, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yes. So thinking through things scientifically, and we do have just a ton of data showing these things. Have you seen this in Gianna's class? Are there a lot more little boys in her class than girls?
Very much so. She there's a class of 10, so we're blessed with a small class size. Only 2 girls, the rest are boys.
I would like to opine just for a second, if you'll indulge
Mhm.
me, why boys tend to, 4 out of 5 children with autism are boys. And the reason that that occurs is because, and when you think about, you've got an older daughter that is neurotypical, okay?
Mhm.
Little girls, it's called the vestibulocochlear system. It's like where they are in space, how they interpret data, how they hear it and process it. And I am going to go ahead and use some, and you can't just pigeonhole everyone, but there are differences between boys and girls. So girls' vestibulocochlear system matures faster than boys, meaning they can multitask. Like they may be holding a baby doll,
Mhm.
pretending they're talking on a fake little phone and stirring a pot just like mommy. And they're their baby like that. Whereas when you watch little boys play, they may, and this isn't all boys. Some boys are more verbal than others, but they'll be lining up their toys, doing different things, and their coordination may not be as coordinated to interpret all this data. Boys' vestibulocochlear system matures more like about 36 months of age. And pediatric ear, nose, and throat doctors are kind of aware of this, whereas little girls, and we'll never know why for Gianna, why this
Mhm.
affected her because there's so many variables. There's never a way to pin it. I would say that when children are sick and they've been sick within the 6 weeks prior to vaccine, or during that time period, you need to avoid the vaccines. We want them well for
Mhm.
at least 6 weeks. But if they have been sick, they need to be avoided, and you do 1 aluminum-containing vaccine at a time, but you're not doing that now, and we're just not going there, but
Yeah.
we'll just support her immune system because you're in this to win this, and
Mhm.
our goal, and I don't know if I said this to you and your husband when you came in, but I try because, when you receive the diagnosis of autism, they say, put your affairs in order. ABA therapy is the only thing that you can do. And depending on where you go, diet doesn't affect it. Hyperbaric oxygen doesn't affect it. Other things doesn't affect it. And this is the plight, and there's nothing more you can do. What kind of a message is that? And then just medicating to treat the symptoms, and we have kids that are drooling, and it's just
Mhm.
terrible. So what you're doing is beautiful. Now, where can people find at least what is the address of your foundation, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, so I can tell you where you can find all the books, and we're working on more contact information, which I can link
Okay.
when the podcast comes out, but you can
Yes.
get, the books and all that stuff on Amazon. They're on barnesandnoble.com, walmart.com, all the kinda online resources, and more to come on the website and the community and connection. So we're working on that process right now to get that stood up.
Great, great. So Jerry, I really want to thank you for sharing your story, sharing Gianna's story, because our hope is that it would provide a profound amount of inspiration and encouragement to so many parents. I stopped short of saying what I want to share with parents
Mhm,
previously is that we want to give children and young adults, a lot of times teenage boys are given no hope whatsoever. And to provide as much function as possible, the longer that a child has been sick with autism, the longer it takes for them to get better. But looking at environmental things, because autism is an environmentally influenced condition because of this biotoxin thing that we talked about. But just to peel the layers of the onion, to identify what someone needs, take away what they don't need, instead of grasping at straws and thinking, I'll try this, I'll try that. But you can't go wrong with gluten-free, dairy-free, MSG-free, refined
mhm.
sugar-free, dye-free, and low toxin living. I'm so excited. I'm going to be interviewing one of the Branch Basics co-founders in a couple of weeks. It's a
Wonderful.
non-toxic cleaning products, and I think every family, vinegar, baking soda, those kind of things. What kind of cleaning
Mhm.
products do you use in your household?
Pretty much those type of things that I will
Beautiful.
say what is quite fascinating. We've gotten back to, like, stuff my grandmother and great-grandmother used to do. And so when I started to as we're starting on this journey, it's like, "Oh, yeah, then my grandmother did that. My great-grandmother used to clean with that." And so my mom used to wipe the floors with vinegar water, like, when she'd clean the floor. So we're really getting back to all of that, and just really we have a big garden outside, so we do grow a lot of our own food and definitely eat organic, but I call it getting back to basics of how human beings are supposed to live, and taking I know some of the stuff may be convenience, but it's not our body doesn't recognize it as nutrition and food. And so really understanding that is important. And then our bodies are amazing, and the healing is can truly take place under the right conditions. And so that's what we've seen with Gianna, and continuing to develop that with the supplements and everything, continuing to help support her how she needs to be supported and real food. And blessing, I love to cook and love to be in the kitchen. So it
Yes.
is great. And then the kids get involved too. So they're excited to make their gluten-free muffins with, and we mash up bananas and put in there. And they're excited to do all of that.
Beautiful. So you're building into the next generation. You have provided so much hope and encouragement. If you had just a few things to say or just wanted to wrap it up and say goodbye to our studio audience, what would you say?
I want to say there's hope, and you're not alone. I think those are the biggest things, because there was a period where I felt alone and didn't know what to do. And especially with your children, there's nothing. harder for a parent than not seeing their children thrive, and what can you do for that? But there is hope. There are resources out there available, and what they need most is your love and support and an advocate. And that's one thing that, leaning into really being an advocate for your kids. But there is hope and there is a healing journey. It is not a one and done. There is no silver bullet. It is a continued journey, and time is your friend. And also early diagnosis. Like, I leaned in before she can have infants having genetic testing. And as soon as you see something that like, mother's intuition is amazing. If you feel that something is off, like, early detection, early intervention is absolutely critical.
I love that part about mom's guts. Moms know. We have to listen to moms, and it's just that inborn sense that's given. So I just want to thank you again. And so stating about hope, because our practice name is Hope for Healing and Getting to the Root. So again, I'd like to thank Vagron, who's our sponsor, and Jerry Alcoser. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
Gianna's story and giving hope to other families.
Thank you so
So
Oh, it's so important, and I'm like you mentioned, it's a mission. I'm so committed. I wanna
yes,
heal, like, I've always been this. I always wanna make a world a better place. That's something I've always strived to do, and there's just so many kids that need help and
it's true.
families that need support, and not everyone is blessed like Luis and I are to be able to do some of the things, so we have to open up that
Yes.
opportunity for others.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think if folks could do anything, it would be that blueprint. And then if they can't afford to partner otherwise, they could at least start the journey with the genetics. And a few sentinel products and supplements that lower inflammation, improve detoxification, provide
Mhm.
methylation, mitochondrial support, and autophagy, these systems in the body, if they can do that, then you can see a world of difference, a world of
Completely. And I
difference.
wanna tell you, you're gonna be so excited. Gianna is now taking 2 tablespoons of Barlean's fish oil every
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
And I have no one to thank except her little brother and sister. So they're like, "It's time for our medicine," and everyone comes out, and Eva takes it, she saw Gianluca take it, and now Gianna lines up and she takes 2 tablespoons, and we've been doing that now for 2 weeks. Super excited because
Fantastic.
that one's been a journey. She's not smelling it, she's not taking it, and now she's like, "That is we are so blessed." She takes all of her supplements, all of her but now that we got the fish oil in, I'm just over the moon.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's the power of positive peer pressure too.
And it's like and I think John Luca was the one she's like, "Oh," he's like, "Hey, it's time for our medicine." And so they all line up and we got our little tablespoons out and now they all do it and she does her too. And I was like, "Okay, G, good job." And we make like a big deal about it and everything. And it's
Cool.
it's taken probably about a year, but we got there.
Yeah. How old is John Luca?
John Luca will be 4 in June. Mhm. And
Beautiful.
yes, but just that and their relationship is super cute. They are now getting to where and it's he'll, like, talk for her, and then they, like, play together, and then they but she's so, like, caring for him, like, he starts crying and upsets her, so she'll scream, and then he cries more, so we got that
Yeah.
going on, but
Okay.
if he cries, she'll go over and, like, hug him, and she'll start rubbing his shoulders and kiss him on the head, and
Oh,
she's just trying to comfort him. It's adorable.
sweet, sweet.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for sharing the
Thank you.
story. Beautiful. All right. Well, you take care. I appreciate your time on a Thursday
Thank you.
afternoon.
Yes. Well, have a
Okay.
great, wonderful Easter weekend.
You too. All right.
Okay.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us at Get to the Root with Hope for Healing. If this episode helped you, follow and share it with someone who needs it. And leave a review. It helps others find us too. For a free consultation, visit our website at gettotheroot.com with the number 2 and schedule a welcome call. We'll see you soon.